All right. So I'm going to start this with someone much wiser and more talented than myself, Nile Rodgers. Uh, he was years ago. He was my manager as an artist, and then we became partners in the Sonic branding agency before Sonic Lens. And I want him to open this talk.
I would not be standing here if it wasn't for my jazz guitar tutor, a man named Mr. Ted Dunbar. One day we were discussing a song I'd have to play later on that night, and I regarded it as silly pop. He said to me, he says, "Hey, Nile, you know, any song that's at the top of the charts is a great composition." Snobbishly, I replied, "How can you call Sugar Sugar a great composition?" He held me by the back of my head, looked me in my eyes, and said, "Because it speaks to the souls of a million strangers." At that moment, I knew what being an artist was. I've been told artists are the gatekeepers of truth.
And so my first question is, did you hear that over the garbage? Okay. So artists are the gatekeepers of truth, speak to the souls of a million strangers. Is that not what we do in branding? Isn't that exactly what we do in branding? There are lessons to be learned from music producers who create brands, essentially. And through Nile and my partnership with him over the years, I've worked with Quincy, RZA, Pete Rock, Q-Tip, a lot of amazing, brilliant people. I've never worked with Rubin, but he's my philosopher king. And I want to share some of the lessons and the process that they use in creating brands. I'm coming out today as a violinist. I was playing the violin before I was talking. I was a late talker. And so for me, I truly understand music as not just an art form, but a form of communication. It's not just something to dance to. It's a way of speaking directly to people's souls. And that's what art does. And I guess the premise of today's talk is that branding is an art. The goals of branding are aligned with the goals of art. It speaks to people on a higher level. It transcends normal conversation. It lasts forever. And here we are in France, my first time in France, the home of Ravel and Debussy and Monet and Impressionism. And Monet's water lilies speak serenity to people without a caption. Rodin's Thinker conveys the heft of humanity without a caption. The Lumiere brothers and Méliès discovered cinema and aimed a camera at a dream for the first time, and it's rippled over the past 100 years. And Saint-Exupéry let us know through a children's book that the most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or touched. They're felt with the heart, and that's the language of music. And I just want one more art reference. When I was a kid, I remember going to see Michelangelo's David in Florence. And I'll never forget this moment where it was transformative for me, but it wasn't David. It was walking down that hallway and seeing these so-called unfinished statues. I knew Michelangelo, to me they're not unfinished. I think Michelangelo was letting us in on a secret, that he knows that the beauty is within the rock, and he's an excavator. It's more about inputs than it is about outputs, and he knows that as he chisels away, it's in there, and he just needs to bring it out and expose it. And again, another analog to branding, right? The brands have a soul, and in the branding industry, our job is to find the deep hidden meaning, and there's a process to that, and to expose it in a way that's culturally resonant. And that's what Nile has a podcast on Apple Music called Deep Hidden Meaning. So this is his term. Behind every hit record and every hit artist and every hit song, none of that's random. There's always a causality to it, and it's always something deep and soulful, and that's why it communicates to people, and discovering that is a process. And I want to reiterate the point that bands are brands. People don't think of that, but I would put Nike and Starbucks and McDonald's up on here, and they would hold these bands are just as strong, if not more, culturally resonant, and they have meaning to people. And it's because bands have the advantage of not just being a quick logo, but they have, the Rolling Stones aren't the Satisfaction riff, they're the sound. They are something that's authentically developed because of who they are. And so it's a holistic approach to creating resonance. And bands realize their brands. Look at Rihanna, right? She has both Fenty and Savage are billion-dollar brands. But brands are not behaving like bands. And maybe they should start to think that way. You could see that it's an upside-down pyramid. And the point I want to make is the way the industry has grown up, in 1992, Intel came out with this powerful mnemonic, and I could talk about facts and figures. It was very successful. And to this day, people still think that that's what sonic branding is or should be, and they don't realize what it could be. And so an RFP will go out, and it'll say, I need a 3-second mnemonic that I could test, and it'll show us that it's memorable and likable and blah, blah, blah. And so the focus is on writing for 3 seconds. Somehow you're supposed to create art and capture the soul of a brand in 3 seconds. And the problem with this is our world today is sound on and immersive, and you're limited. If you want to reference the brand in your sound, you're going to have to stick those notes in there, or you're going to have to shoehorn a small asset into everything you do. You have no wiggle room. And so the approach that Nile and I aligned on, why we did what we did, was foundation first. You get your mnemonic, but that happens later. That happens as a distillation of the larger essence, just like the Satisfaction riff represents the Rolling Stones because it's a distillation of their sound. For example, does anyone feel anything when they hear that? Did that evoke anything? Okay, why? Because it came from somewhere. I could play you any 1 second of this song and you will have that feeling. And that's true for most music that's art. You could take 1 second of Beethoven's Fifth and you'll know what it is. You can capture the essence of something larger in something small. This is an extreme example, but you can get a mnemonic that's more powerful than just a gimmick. And so I'm going to talk about Rick Rubin, who I've never worked with, but I've read his book 20 times, and I'm going to read it every year. I'm competing with Not Attractive Noise, but Rick Rubin is not a musician. He's not an engineer. He's not a technician. He's a philosopher. And yet he's worked with R.E.M., Pearl Jam, Green Day, Beastie Boys, Johnny Cash, Radiohead. It doesn't matter who the artist is. It doesn't matter. It's because he has a process of helping them get to the deep hidden meaning. And he put this process in a book. Thank you, Rick Rubin. The Creative Act. Please read it. He doesn't talk about music in this book at all. But it's a philosophy that to be an artist is not an elite thing. The universe is giving us everything we need. It's feeding us all the inspiration we need, and we just have to be an antenna, and we have to be listening. And if you boil down his process, which I'm about to do, there's a couple stages. Awareness, seeds, which is finding those inspirations, just decoding that awareness into seeds, experimenting with it, crafting all the way at the end, and then putting it out in the world. And so I'm going to refer back to Nile because he's going to explain how you feed that creative act for brands.
Marco and I we just love each other. Marco's an amazing musician, but when you see the way we think about music and the way that we talk about the internalization process, and we sort of give you the statistics that are viable, that you really can actually check yourselves and see that we don't just base this on our own passion and emotion and artistic interpretation, even though that has a lot to do with it. What we do is we actually analyze the data of who's, consuming your product, who's looking at it, what kind of stuff are they probably likely to be into, and then that starts to give us more information.
I wanted to have what we would call music intelligence, because people, they don't know how to necessarily curate their brand properly with music. So that's what we do. That's what I've done all my life. If you have the right music for the right product and you curate this properly, man, there's no end to it.
What he did there was describe something that we coined music intelligence. And so the backbone of the process, what I want you to take away from this is there's the creative act of creating the art to capture your brand so that it resonates. Underneath that, you need to guide it along the way, every step of the way, guided by the strategy of the brand and what it is that they're trying to achieve, what it is they're trying to say, who they are. And so underneath is the music intelligence, and on top is the creative act, and it's a constant back and forth. Think of it as the rhythm section underneath John Coltrane, right? John Coltrane is being guided by the rhythm section, so he's playing off of that. So it starts with awareness. Nile begins every morning at the crack of dawn with a 5 to 10 mile walk. He's about 69 years old. He doesn't wear headphones. He doesn't talk on the phone. He doesn't go with anybody. He doesn't listen to music. He opens himself up religiously every morning to the universe. He wants to prepare for a creative day. Quincy Jones used to say a prayer every day to be able to receive those signals. Miles Davis has a story about Tony Williams, who I consider probably the best jazz drummer ever. They're walking down the stairs of a building, marble stairs, and Tony drops some pieces of his drum kit and they go tumbling down the stairs. They bounce off the railing, they land on the sidewalk. They have a gig coming up, and Miles is like, Tony's gonna be pissed. Tony grabs Miles' arm and says, "Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Like, the universe just gave me some rhythm that I would never have come up with on my own." That's the artist. That's the creative act. That's awareness. And so in sonic branding, we have to listen. You gotta force yourself to be aware, and we do this by analyzing with human beings mostly. Your brand, your competitor's brand, brands that are not in competitive set, that are doing a good job of expressing what you want to express. That's really, you really learn what to do. And then as you go through it, we turn it into data. A lot of it's subjective, but that's okay. And we also pull out things that we notice, hypotheses, and they start to feed the brief and the mood boarding and strategy. Decoding. I like this story. Quincy Jones was given Leslie Gore to produce by the record executives. At the time, she was coming off It's My Party. Huge hit, 1961. At the time, in the early 60s, all the charts were basically girl bands obsessed with subservience. And do the things he likes to do. Wear your hair just for him. I will follow him, etc. So Quincy got to know her and was looking for the deep hidden truth. And she wanted to state that there was a subculture bubbling up in 1962 of independence and confidence and not wanting to be owned. And so he enabled this song, You Don't Own Me, right? Against the wishes of all the people who knew how to make money for the record label. And it never made #1 because the Beatles, it made #2. But it's eternal. It's an anthem for feminism and independence and women empowerment. And that's because he decoded the culture, and he decoded what was the truth that could be told, that could resonate in that culture. And the reason this is important in sonic branding is the executive creator History Channel, which we branded, used this term, the blander, and I love it because he said his frustration as a creative director was good ideas can come up, but because all the stakeholders in the company had to weigh in, and because they expected something because of the sector, they chisel away at piece by piece, and they put it through the blander until it ends up being bland. So a great example, we branded Al Jazeera, and this is the sound of news across the world. Okay, you get it. It's Rocky. But because we were able to look at all the stuff that we did in our awareness stage and share that knowledge, because we turned it into data, and we could turn data into charts, and we could say, here's what we noticed, here's how you could stand out, here's what everyone's doing, here's what's effective. We're able to give the stakeholders the confidence and the perspective to allow ideas that are good for them to come to fruition. And that's like the key thing for branding, right? So Al Jazeera is the voice of the people. That doesn't sound like everyone else, but it's part of a language because we built a foundation. So they could sound as newsy as they want. Seeds, stage 3 of the creative act, seeds. It's finding inspiration. Inspiration literally means to breathe in. If you go back to the Latin, it actually means to open up a space to allow things in. And Quincy used to call this goosebump testing. And an example is, if you get goosebumps, that means lightning is striking you. If lightning strikes, you got to stick around and capture all that electricity because that's a gift. And when he was tasked to write the theme song for Sanford & Son, he was thinking, I need to capture this character, bluesy, funky, soulful, hands in the dirt. And he heard the sound of this instrument called the bass harmonica. And he knew that that was the soul of this track, and that ended up being, listen for it, right? It comes right in the beginning. It's the bass line. That sets this is the blues progression, it's a standard blues progression. That's it. That, I get goosebumps every time I play it because it works. Pete Rock basically invented jazz-infused hip-hop. He told the story where he was listening to a record, jazz record by Tom Scott, and he started crying, and he didn't know why. And there's something about that saxophone line that made him think of his childhood. And he wrote, I reminisce. And, we wouldn't have Q-Tip if it wasn't for that. So being aware, in sonic branding, we find pieces of sound, and we do kind of more sophisticated mood boarding where it's in context so you understand what you're listening to. And we see, does this evoke a certain thing that you're going for? And there's a process to it. But we're trying to evoke goosebumps so that the stakeholders of the brand can start to own the ideas. And that gets funneled down. You notice creativity's down at the bottom. And eventually these seeds end up in the different flower pots of decision-making areas that artists and composers need to think about. And we narrow down the sandbox, and that's not a bad thing. By getting specific and making some of the decisions that they need to make ahead of time so they end up in the right space. Picasso's a great example. When he went through his blue period, he limited his color palette to blues and greens. Did that make the art less powerful? No. Did it make it more focused? Yes. So there's power in limiting the sandbox, and that's a very important part of getting sound to do what you want it to do. Creative briefs. This ends up in a creative brief. It's very specific. We think of it as a roadmap for composers. And
80% of kids.
I'm going to just skip ahead. That's the creative director of Disney saying that how it tested. The point is, this isn't, I want to make art for art's sake. The point is, guided art will test off the charts on everything that you're trying to achieve. It always happens. Is everything we do, because we go through the process, tests on every metric that they care about, emotional metric, off the charts. Next comes experimentation. Oscar Wilde said, some things are too important to be taken seriously. Now, what's more important than your brand, right? It's literally the most important thing in your business. So you need room to play. RZA, again, another blessing through Nile. I work a lot with RZA to this very day. He created Wu-Tang. But not only did he create Wu-Tang, he's fearless. I call him the fearless creative. He's like, yeah, I'm going to be an actor. So he's an actor in a movie with Russell Crowe. I'm going to score movies. He starts scoring movies for Quentin Tarantino. I could produce and write. Came out with a series on Hulu. I actually am in it. And then I could direct a movie. I could produce a movie. Critically acclaimed, came out last year. So he's such an inspiration. This is the opening to the Hulu Wu-Tang American Saga show, and I like showing it because he creative directed it. Of course, he's a creative director. So if you look, if you could see it, it's all the seeds of the Wu-Tang, right? Grown up on Staten Island, every member of Wu-Tang was in well, not every member, but they were mostly in drug gangs. They were literally shooting at each other before he brought them together. So it's the drug gangs, the sounds of the subway, it's the sounds of the police and bullets. It's the killer bees. It's kung fu, this idea that we could battle each other like kung fu movies with our words. It's drum machines and early technologies and mixtapes and chess. All this stuff that came together to create something new and revolutionize the hip-hop industry and the music itself. We did branding for ATB, which is like the non-bank Canadian bank. And we ended up finding out, unexpectedly, through our music intelligence, that the sound of bedroom pop evoked all the same things that they were trying to say. So we ended up creating the sound of a bank with bedroom pop music, working with a Canadian artist. But not just making a song and being like, here's your anthem. We tested it, we found out what it was evoking different things in different consumers, and then we created different versions of it so we could start to build a sound like the Rolling Stones. The song was the sun in the solar system, but we could build the planets and everything refers back to it, but there's a soul in the middle. And this is the sound of Canadian banks on the left, the blender. Okay? Here's ATB. But not only do they have a mnemonic, they have a language. They could do the silliest things. There's a podcast opening. Here's an animated GIF. So there's a sound. They have their mnemonic, but they have flexibility, and they have rules that they could build upon. Then we get into crafting. Now, today, again, RFPs go out, music houses go right into crafting. We have 3 weeks. Build us something that could test well. All right, that's just the way it is. That's what I'm trying to change. Nile taught me work with the very best artists. So at this point, you have your brief. You've really figured it out. You have the brand on board because they own it. They were part of the journey. They authored their own creative direction. And now you just work with the best artists because you need to work with artists because they bring a voice to it. When David Bowie came to Nile Rodgers and said, make me a hit record, Nile was like, you're David Bowie, all right. How do I do it? We know what we want to do with the song. I'm bringing in Stevie Ray Vaughan. Right? Like, you don't know that that's Stevie Ray Vaughan, but that's the secret sauce that helped that song become what it is. And we did that with JP Morgan Chase. We ended up, they needed something very thematic, something kind of perpetual motion moving forward. We worked with John Lunn. He's the composer of Downton Abbey. So he's very thematic. And we got everything, you can't see the chart, but everything that they cared about tested off the charts because we did it the right way. We had a strategy. Last stage in the creative act is the release. Let go. Rick Rubin says, let go. At some point, you got to unmarry yourself and move on. In sonic branding, you need to think about the world that we're in. You need a strategy. We're not sitting through 30-second commercials and waiting for the last 5 seconds so we can hear intel. We are interacting with brands everywhere. It's an immersive world, and the world is very sound on. In some places, it's visuals off. Podcasts, smart speakers, you name it, right? So the sound is really important. So what we do is we create sonic identity systems. That is, build, to start off, toolkits for every length of time, for every platform, for every emotion that is consistent with who you are as a brand. Build these toolkits for all the people that are working with the sound so that they have somewhere to go and get stuff. And then you build a system like a visual identity system. You do a sonic identity system. And it lives in your brand Bible. And when you're working, if you're a global brand, for example, Coca-Cola, global brand, the head of music there brought me in to help him create the sound of Coca-Cola. And everything you hear, we didn't produce. We figured out the brand. Well, we produced some of it, but we needed to fit in a tagline. We needed to fit in intrinsic sound so you could experience thirst and refreshment. We needed to work in a mnemonic and a new melody that's memorable. And then we had guidelines. So, and I'll give you a little, flexibility was really the thing about this campaign. There's a mnemonic. Here's the same song in a totally different genre. Avicii created, I talked about the solar system. The core song was Avicii. It was a song that we figured out. We gave it to him, he produced it. That became a radio song. And then every territory in the world, 12 countries at once, had their own creative needs. And those creative directors were able to create music that fit those needs, and they weren't shoehorned into something that didn't fit. And if you could see this, it's basically going back to the pyramid and showing that this works because we built from the bottom up. And we ended up with a really great mnemonic, but that's distilled from a brand sound and a brand language, so you could just do so much more with it. And I like this phrase, build universes, not cages. And this image is like, why are you showing me Minecraft? But you could take any 2 by 2 inch part of that image and know that it's Minecraft. So they created a brand universe. And visually, I see this more and more, and it's so exciting. Musically, only in our work. You need to build a language. So when we worked on Oxygen, which is a true crime network with NBC, we worked with the design agency, and we knew the insight was people watch Oxygen because they want to be detectives. So we're appealing to their inner detectives. So the visuals never show you on the nose what the crime was, who did it. They don't show you the weapon. It's all very forensic, these quick-moving forensic graphics and like the clues. So we did the same thing with sound. We created toolkits of clues that would work in the same timings as the visual so that they could have a modular, integrated system of branding. And that sound design of crime sounds of people, gasping, and so you could feel people's fear, and some musical elements, etc. And that allowed them to create mnemonics that tell little stories and make you try and figure out what's happening.
Now, back to Oxygen, the home for true crime.
And so I'm going to wrap it up with the idea, and someone else, we were just talking about this. You need to act like a band, right? Led Zeppelin was pretty amazing. When John Bonham was gone, it was over. Everyone plays a role. Everyone works together. I always try very, very hard to work with everyone who's involved in branding, the design, the research, everything. It's one team effort. And our work, especially the listening part and the awareness part, what we find will inspire other aspects of the branding. And I can give examples, but we don't have time for that. But work like a band, brand like a band. And I will end with Nile, bookend this talk with Nile Rodgers.
When people work with me, they think that I'm the boss. Believe me, every record I do, I join the band. I try and make every artist believe that all I have is their best interest at heart. I do not believe, I remember saying to Madonna, I said to Madonna, when we finish this record, it's gonna say, Madonna, produced by Nile Rodgers. My name doesn't mean shit, it's gonna be this big. This award, which is amazing to me, is really because of all the people that have allowed me to come into their lives and just join their band. Be it Mick Jagger, be it Madonna, be it Bowie, be it the B-52s, be it INXS, be it Daft Punk, be it Pharrell Williams, be it Diana Ross, be it Sister Sledge. I mean, just goes on and on and on. And I gotta tell you, thank you, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
That's how he did it. He became a member of their band, always. He got inside, and he worked. They were communicating to each other. So I guess that's my takeaway, hopefully, is that music, and Steve is going to come up in a second and help me talk about this, but the way things are done, there's so much being left on the table, and music just happens last because people have the pyramid upside down. And they just feel like that's how it's done. And the opportunity cost is huge. And the excitement that I have about this is even bigger because there's so much that could be done in today's day and age, this immersive world we live in, that the future's really bright. And so I want to bring Steve up.
Strategy Director is my official title, which is kind of a cool title, but people say, yes, it's a cool title. What the hell do you do? And I say the easiest way to define my job is I'm in the business of taking sound science, blending it with sound art in order to help people make sound decisions. So it's this idea of everything that Marco is talking about. So let's just start there. You shared a lot of, Niles, RZA, Rick Rubin. I'm curious, now's your time to shine. So when we're talking about awareness, what are the practices or the rituals for you? Niles gets up in the morning, he doesn't wear headphones, he walks around. What's the process of awareness like for you?
Well, you got to be aware that you got to be aware. That's the first thing. And you got to put your antenna up. And, there's a lot of things that go into it. I mean, growing up practicing an instrument 3 hours a day, like my entire childhood, you do an hour of scales, and that's not fun. But you are really taking in the nuances of every little detail, and you got to train yourself to listen. And I showed that image of the brain and whatever. In branding, you got to understand the sonic landscape, and there's so many clues. You learn what people are doing wrong, mostly. And then you could study the people that are doing things right, and you start to find the gold nuggets that in passive listening people won't capture. And if you're trying to be distinct, which you have to be as a brand, you got to listen really hard. You need a process to help you focus. So when it comes to sonic branding, it's the process. Everything that we listen to, there's hundreds of variables that we have to scale and rate, so we have data. It forces you to listen over and over and really think about what you're hearing and why it's working or not working. So it's a forced discipline.
So thinking about that forced discipline and working with clients, so it's one thing for you to be aware, but I can imagine you're in rooms with clients who are very unaware. when it comes to sound. So are there particular things that you do to kind of bring clients to a point of awareness where they're more open to maybe listening, hearing things in their brand that they've never thought about before, beyond the process and the audio mood boards and what are some things that you found consistently for you tend to open clients' ears to
Well,
listening?
it starts before we even start listening. It starts with prioritizing what, let's say adjectives, like what do you want us to figure out? Who are you? What are your brand adjectives? What's your personality? What's your tonality? What do you not want? What want to not be? Help us come up with the criteria with which we will judge the music. And so they're already dictating the process. And as we go, because we're creating data, even if a lot of it is subjective, as we share that data, they own it. They're in the process. And because it's data, we could create visualizations. And it becomes a very fun process because most people start by thinking, you can't talk about music. It's too ethereal, right? Like, you can't pin it on a board, but you can. And we show them that you could visualize it and you could point to things and you could start to treat it like a marketing science. And so then they own it more. And they really feel and this is like the secret to never failing, is they are authors they feel like they're authors of the entire strategy and the entire process. And our job, we're Michelangelo's chisel. It's in there. They know the soul. We're chiseling away with their guidance, and we're showing them what we're finding. And that's really the process.
Well, I think, you mentioned language. You talked about it in your presentation as well, thinking about music as a language. And I think a lot of times I've seen clients in those aha moments, after you go through this process and everybody starts to learn a language, they start to believe that they can talk about audio and sound and music in a different sort of a way. And I think sometimes that makes the job easier then, because you've kind of have a definition, so you're not starting from zero. You're not beginning with a creative brief every time you're thinking about where sound is going to fit.
Yeah. I mean, the downside to what I do is when we're done, it's not a repeat client. Like that bank, I onboarded their music house. I spent a week with these people, and we love each other. But they're going to get all the work for the next 20 years. Our job is to figure out the guidelines for them to have a language, and then to educate and onboard and give them a starter kit. ATB Bank, there were over 2,000 assets. That was pretty hardcore. But they know what to do. They know how they could work with bedroom pop artists in Canada, how it's changing how they're sponsoring festivals. It's like changing the sound in the banks. It's changing everything. But they're really running on their own. They could speak the language because, again, they help figure it out. They own it, And the head of brand at ATB won the award. Internal every year, they have an award for thinking outside the box and being the most. And he won that, and he owns it, and I love it,
So in thinking about sound as a system, which you talked about, and thinking about a foundation, again, it really resonated with me when people talk about sonic branding, and immediately they go to the mnemonic. They don't think about the strategy. And one of my favorite Sun Tzu quotes from Art of War is that tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. And kind of literally, thinking about approaching a brand and just starting with throwing sounds against the wall is essentially what we've been experiencing this whole afternoon, is a bunch of noise while we're trying to find the signal in that, which is your voice. So in this process, when you're thinking about building a universe, is that there from the very beginning? Are you thinking about what is the ecosystem of the brand? As we think about what we're building, do I need to be thinking creatively about how this might be translated as a language? Is that system in your mind as you start? Tell me a little bit about how that works.
That's a good question. I haven't. I don't have anything in my mind. That's really hard to do. Like when you're a music house, especially most sonic branding houses started off as music scoring commercials, so they have this instinct. Like I have a creative instinct. I'm going to act on it. I know what to do. It takes a lot of discipline. This goes back to the scales. It's like you got to create the potential energy and turn it into kinetic energy. You know, so we hold back. We can have some ideas and write them down, but it's a discovery. It's a journey of discovery that we take with the client. No idea. We had no idea we were going to end up with bedroom pop, like no idea. And that's why it's cool, because if it's obvious, someone else is going to do it. So how that language evolves those are the ingredients. People don't realize music. They think, you know, if you don't know music, you think, okay, there's harmony, there's rhythm, there's melody, and instrumentation, and I got to figure out what instruments and what tempo, and then that's the magic thing. And no, there are thousands of design. It's not just about the colors; it's about everything. And you got to go deep. But eventually, you start to uncover some truth,
Right.
and that the language reveals itself, and that's like the most rewarding part of this process. Is to me, that's magic. That's the goosebumps thing, because you don't know what you're going to find, but when you find it and you share it, and the client had a hand in it, everyone gets really excited, you know. And then they're like, "What else can we do with music? You know, can we use it in our stores? Can we do like social? Can we do like 5-second stories on social media that uses our sound but doesn't? It's like consistent without being repetitive. People get excited, as you know,
Yeah.
right? And I have a question for you.
All right.
What's the difference between belief and behavior? Because I think everyone believes what we're talking about, but why is the behavior not happening?
Yeah, I think this idea of whenever I talk to people about the power of sound, nobody pushes back on that, because we all know instinctively how important sound and music is in our own life. You know, our lives are soundtracked with pieces of sound from our childhood, that first song that was playing when we had our first kiss, or that song we lean into when we broke up in a relationship. Nobody denies that. But then when it gets to the behavior of, you know, you mentioned talking about audio first frameworks and thinking, you know, there is kind of a systemic issue, I think, where sound is often treated as something that's bolted on at the end. It's not a core part of the design element, if you will. You're talking about music houses and that kind of being the birth of a lot of sonic identity, where that's really a design job. It's not a composition job. As you know, composition is that piece of it that kind of brings it to life, but in the process there's design. And so this is a problem that all of us that have worked with sound and brands have struggled with. The intellectual assent to the power of sound, but then in practice, it's not there. And I think when you do the practice and you get those moments that you were describing where the client is, oh, we can think about sound here. Oh, we can think about sound here. Oh, if we thought about this earlier, oh, we're working on our brand colors. Is there a sound element that translates into colors? What's our brand shape? What is other things about the brand that we're trying to communicate through other senses that sound is just as important? So I, haven't found the secret bullet yet, because I do feel like it is a systemic issue, and it's not just convincing people of the power of sound. It's convincing leadership in organizations enough to change the systemic thought so that at the beginning of the brief, at the beginning of any design process, sound is thought of. It's not necessarily that there's a sound that will come out of that, but it's part of the process.
Right. So the answer is education.
Yeah.
I mean, when I encounter this problem, if I get an RFP, like I said, it's for a mnemonic, and I say, okay, can I please have an hour of your time to give you an educational seminar on what's possible and how you can solve some. ATB they were repositioning the bank. That solved a strategic problem for them. So can I just show you that you can get your mnemonic, but that you can do more? And that's a solve that I've
Yeah.
come up with, but it doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think too, it was interesting. You referred a number of times to how when you go through this process and it works, when you do bring metrics and testing into this, very often you see that you're, right on the bullseye or close enough to the bullseye that what you might learn from the research is a little tweak here or a little tweak there. And I think in all my years of doing this work, that's another thing that helps us, is that there are now more metrics. We can see that sonic cues, for instance, can amplify memory for a brand in a way that even a visual logo doesn't. So the more conversations we can have like that are great. So in wrapping up, we're talking a lot about the possibilities. I guess for you, what's the next possible thing with sound that you'd like to realize?
What I hope people start to ask is, and Nile says this, he never goes into the studio without asking the question, what if? You got to look for the what ifs. And I want brands to ask themselves that question, or agencies, like what's possible? What if? Can we look into it? There's no one at any brand, at any agency, at any sound house that's actually putting a sonic lens up to it with a strategic mindset and thinking about what you can do before you do it. And that's the question, and that's going to be our segue out. We're going to do a roundtable, and we'd love to have an open, fun discussion with anyone who wants to explore the what ifs of sound, because it is manifest destiny. It's like the great frontier in my mind. So
That's great. All right.
thank you very much.